All right, thanks so much to everybody who has joined us. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a great group in here. I want to introduce myself quickly. My name is Rebecca. I'm the Manager of Institutional Relations here at EF Gap Year, and it's been a real joy for me to be also spearheading our webinar series. And I'm especially excited to have you all here today to talk about this really important topic that I think is top of mind for a lot of people right now. We've got a lot of folks in here. We got a lot of great questions in these registrations. I think the amount of interest that we got in this topic really speaks volumes about how much everyone is thinking about plans for next year in ways they couldn't have anticipated even just a couple months ago. So while I was working on getting together the content for this session itself, I really used your Zoom comments and the feedback you provided there to really help shape it. So I really appreciate that. And I hope that we can address all of your questions and concerns in this session today. I know we have a few different voices in here. We've got some parents, we've got some recently graduated high school students, we've got some current college students, or even people graduating from college right now who are trying to think about those next steps and think about what you can be doing next year to really make sure you're making the most out of your time. One big thing I just want to say before we get started is that you're really not alone in thinking about this and questioning this. We've heard from so many students lately that, next year is really an unprecedented time, a time when you're really trying to consider all options, think about the world around you, make informed decisions. And I just want to sort of present you with some options today. So before I really get into the thick of things, I want to quickly go through a couple of Zoom reminders. So everyone should be automatically muted to keep the background noise to a minimum. I know you'll all have some questions as I go along. Feel free to throw those in that Q&A box down there at the bottom. Our goal is to answer some of them as we go. My colleague Lauren, you can see her as EF Gap Year Info. She's really a font of knowledge, so she might be typing out the answers to some of your questions as we go. And then we'll also save some for me to answer verbally at the end of the presentation as well. So I'm going to turn my camera off to walk you through these slides, but I will turn it back on at the end to answer all of your questions, and I'll be guiding you through the coming slides. All right, so as I mentioned just now, I was really struck by all these thoughtful questions and comments that you all put in your Zoom registrations. So I really want to start off today's session by looking at those questions and comments and some of these main themes that came out of them. So I've summarized some of these main questions that came up in those Zoom registrations into this chart, and I've organized them into three main themes that I saw from a lot of you. So the first is travel restrictions, the second is future uncertainty, and the third is comparing options. So I really want to go through these themes today and provide you with some of these answers to your great questions. And these are questions that we're definitely hearing a lot right now. Our whole team, as we talk with students and parents who are really thinking hard about next year and what the best choice is for them. These are, definitely questions that are things we're hearing every day on the phones. So I know this is a difficult time. These are important questions to be asking, and we really appreciate that you shared them with us. So just to read through a few of them, a lot of you did have questions about travel restrictions, what's happening right now in terms of Americans being allowed in different countries across the globe, what about in the future? And of course, there are questions about how then this relates to our programs. Will they be able to run? What are the options for postponing the January 2021 gap semester to later? Questions like these. Then, of course, there are questions that fall under this category of future uncertainty. So we heard from some folks who know they want to take a gap, for example, but they feel overwhelmed by the options in terms of what to do and where to go. We also heard from some folks who are understandably feeling a little bit pessimistic about future plans. And so I hope that tuning in today will, give you some clarity to feel empowered by your options. And of course, we also hear a lot about, the uncertainty of college plans for next year. Colleges across the country are making decisions right now. Some of them are clearer than others. Some of them may be, more favorable to you than others. And it's just really a time of uncertainty, I think, in terms of a lot of the decisions that we used to take for granted. So I also want to go through this idea of comparing options. We have a lot of great questions here. Should I take a gap year instead of paying out of state tuition? I think that financial aspect is definitely weighing on a lot of people's minds. What is the best option for success, both socially and academically? This is a huge question. I mean, college is not just about taking classes and excelling in the classroom, but it's also about that social experience, the type of growth that you do outside the classroom. So definitely want to address that today. And I really love this last statement. Someone commented, my son is looking for options that will keep him learning and growing, but also provide him a sense of purpose. So I think that really encapsulates what we want to go through today in terms of presenting you with some options so that you don't feel stuck in the situation of really not knowing what's coming next. So with those questions in mind, I wanted to shape today's session sort of around those themes. So we're going to go through three main topics before going into the Q&A. So first we'll talk about the global situation, both present and future. Then we'll talk about our response here at EF Gap Year specifically to this situation. And then we'll talk about your options for next year. So I want to also encourage you, if you have a chance, maybe after this webinar, bookmark this site here on our webpage. It's our travel advisory site where you can just get a lot of information about what we're doing, how we see the world right now, and it really lays it out in a really, I think, quite coherent way. So I'm definitely going to touch on a lot of things that are on that page today, but that's a great resource for you going forward. So got to rip off that Band-Aid about the current situation with travel restrictions on US citizens, because a lot of you are asking about this, and I think it's really important to address it. So currently there are only a limited number of countries that are allowing US citizens. One of them, the Dominican Republic, is one of the countries that we go to on our GAP, for example. Some other countries like Turkey are also allowing US citizens. In terms of Europe, looking at the EU specifically, it's not currently open to US citizens. Also within the US itself, we do have a travel advisory at level 4 in place from the State Department. So basically this is basically encouraging Americans not to travel anywhere outside the US right now. And the US is also banned from certain countries due to the high COVID-19 rates in the US. That's kind of the reasoning that a lot of countries are giving as they're putting these travel restrictions on US citizens, US passport holders coming into their countries. So obviously right now, travel is almost impossible. So when we do implement it, we want to do it under conditions that are going to be safe and healthy for our students and for the communities that we're traveling to. So as we look ahead, we want to sort of, we don't have a crystal ball, we can't tell the future, but we can make some informed contingency plans based on different outcomes that may happen. And we can also, stay in touch with our global network. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we're getting a lot of great information from our EF staff and our connections across the globe. So we really, when we do open up and when we run our programs next year, we are going to be doing so really thoughtfully and really with a lot of, contemplation about what the right steps are. So a few things that we are seeing in the coming months is that many countries have plans in place to open up to US citizens in the coming months. Some of them as early as August 1st. For example, that's when Costa Rica is planning to open to tourism. A lot of countries are wanting to open, but they're wanting to do so with a lot of, foresight and a lot of thought in mind about what's going to be best for the people visiting their country and what's going to be best for the country itself. So for example, the EU is reevaluating every 2 weeks. I think the EU is a great example of a really thoughtful opening process. So they're opening in phases. Every 2 weeks, they're reevaluating what their next phase is going to look like. So they're using this sort of socially responsible look to figure out how to open in a way that makes sense for their citizens. So right now they're saying it doesn't make sense for US citizens to travel here, but that's likely to change within the next few months as we, hopefully are able to combat this virus here in the US. I also want to highlight that this US State Department level 4 worldwide risk level is likely to be restricted to only certain really high-risk countries in the fall. So right now it's this global ban. But what's likely to happen in the fall is that level 4 will only apply to certain countries where there is, a virus outbreak. So that's something too that we want to keep in mind. We won't be sending students to any countries that are at that level 4 risk. And so that's definitely something that we're taking into account as we plan for next year. Another thing I want to point out, I think it's really easy being here in the US as I am, and I would assume most of you are too, to really get into our bubble of seeing what's happening in the US. But every day, I'm talking with my colleagues in Zurich. That's where our operations team is based. I used to live in Germany, so I'm talking with my friends back there. It's really amazing to hear stories of different places in the world where, life is almost back to normal. I mean, of course, people are taking precautions, but you're able to go back into your offices, go to restaurants, live a life that feels relatively like before. And so I think that this is really important to note when thinking about the relative risk between being here in the US, particularly on a college campus, versus being in, a country in Europe where the virus has been relatively well contained. So, it's a really hard decision and there's a lot of risk calculation to do on a personal level, absolutely. But I just want to present the idea that, what we're seeing here in the US is certainly not the case in many places across the globe and most of the places that our students will be traveling to next year. So now I want to look at this sort of through the lens of us here at EF. So at EF, we have just a really incredible global team. I feel really thankful every day to be working here. And our gap year little division itself is just the tip of the iceberg, which is really cool. So we actually have teams across the globe in 114 different countries. And that's what really enables us to provide top-notch gap year experiences that, incorporate all of these different components. And we're really able to tap into our existing EF networks and support to create this experience. I think that global presence and how large our organization is has become more important than ever right now. So not only are these teams around the globe providing us with the most up-to-date information on the ground across the globe, but they're also able to implement the precautions that we're taking to make sure that the on-the-ground response is put in place and enforced. So for example, with the language component part of our program, we have a network of language schools across the globe with entire local staffs there, and they're implementing measures to make sure that each school has sanitation procedures in place. So I'll go over some specifics of those in this next slide, but I just want to reassure you that this global staff across the world is really looking out for the health and safety of our program participants. I also want to talk about some of those general modifications that we've made to really ensure that travel can start safely and securely. So we made a few decisions last month to postpone our year program to start in October rather than September. And we also added a new program, the Costa Rica Immersion for the fall, which is such a great option for students who are looking for a closer to home, one destination option. And I'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that program later. But we've also implemented a number of different on-the-ground policies, including working with our transportation and accommodation providers to make sure they're implementing high sanitation standards. Everything from that really high level of what's this program going to look like, what dates can we change, to the very nitty-gritty of, how are we going to provide hand sanitizer and masks? We're thinking about all these questions, big, small, everywhere in between. I also want to assure you that, very worst case scenario, that we have policies in place where the US travel ban level 4 alert is still global, or there are international restrictions that are absolutely making it impossible for students to travel at all. We do have a great refund policy in place. Students would get the full refund minus just that $500 application fee. So I think that's something great to keep in the back pocket. We don't anticipate that to be the case, but we have thought through really every scenario and have tried to come up with policies that will allow you to make an informed decision and feel confident that, if things do go awry, you can still recover from that decision. I also want to talk a little bit about our educational philosophy, and that's really something that I'm super passionate about coming from this international education background. Our educational philosophy really remains the core of our programs, and that's what really drives us to keep this global focus on our programs this year. The heart of our program is experiential learning. We really believe that students need to be out in the world, not just in a classroom or behind a screen learning. That's just not what our educational philosophy revolves around. So we do see some other gap providers who are pivoting to online options, and some of those are really wonderful, but for us, that just doesn't provide the experience that we want for our students. So for us, we really see learning as happening through living, right? Through developing these global skills, through having conversations with new friends and new languages, through navigating these different city streets. We really believe in this power of in-person global experiences, and that's why we are really enacting all of these very necessary health and safety standards to make sure that that can happen. As always, I do want to highlight that we provide, and we always have provided, 24/7 local and global support. So we actually also arrange all of students' flights for them. That's included within the program fee. So we're responsible for them should any changes to itineraries happen. We have an entire dedicated team that's really looking at them. So, Wherever your student is on the road, not only do they have that on the ground support from our EF staff members, but they also have an entire global team ready to go into action should they need them. Finally, I just want to end this by talking a little bit about our mission at EF as a whole. Our mission is opening the world through education, and that's something that we as a company have been doing for 55 years, and something that we're feeling really excited about and really confident to do moving forward. So we actually think that this mission maybe is even more important than it ever has been when we're in the middle of a global crisis like this. This is really when we need more global citizens who are ready to tackle these issues that we're facing today. So I want to get into a few specifics of our precautions before I move on to talk about the exact options for you in this coming year. So these are a few of the categories where we're implementing new policies and precautions. So first of all, we have a really strong, long-established relationship with some of the largest airline and hotel and transportation companies, also global government agencies, health organizations. These partnerships with our leadership roles in major industry organizations mean that we're really actively shaping new worldwide cleanliness and safety standards. For example, just want to give you a quick example here. To ensure a safe travel experience, EF is following the protocols and recommendations established by the World Travel and Tourism Council, which include various health and hygiene and social distancing guidelines. So, we're really trying to work with a number of different experts across the globe to make sure that we're doing everything, to a higher standard than we even need to be doing. Second of all, we really want to ensure that students are healthy before they begin their program. So before traveling, for example, students are asked to complete a pre-travel health check, and all EF GAP participants will be, closely self-monitoring their health throughout the program. They also have, like I said, this incredible team on the ground that if they should feel ill at any moment, there's an entire chain of actors that's going to go into effect as soon as anything like that happens. Our entire team is going through various trainings to figure out how to best support those students. Thinking too about travel preparation, prior to departing, all students will get a lot of information about any local COVID-19 guidelines and regulations in place in their destination. In addition, those local country guidelines and specific protocols that EF is putting in place, we of course expect our students to be observing common sense health and hygiene and social distancing practices just like they do at home. So, we really do have a high standard for our students and expect them to be mature and, ready to enact the best personal behavior standards to ensure their own safety as well as that of their community. Thinking about on program, this is going to be the most flexible and most excited group of global citizens we've ever had travel, I think. Activities on program or specific excursions might not look exactly like they look on the page. They may need to be adjusted based on local conditions and developments. So we're just constantly working with our local partners, tourist sites, hotels, restaurants, schools, NGOs, conservation habitats, internship host companies, all of these different people that make the GAP experience what it is. We're working with them all to really provide a safe experience for students. So just to give a couple of examples, maybe we would change an itinerary, have a smaller group size, avoid crowded locations at peak times, enact special precautions when working with children at service locations, all those kinds of actions that we can take that won't change the heart of our program. We're still having that same educational philosophy, but it might not look exactly the way it does on paper right now. Thinking about specific measures, they do vary across program modules and locations, but all accommodations and learning environments will have enhanced protocols. I don't want to go into the depths of specifics here, but just thinking about our language school, for example, we have enhanced cleaning protocols, protective plexiglass barriers being installed in key customer service areas, hand sanitizing stations, all those kinds of things that you would want from a really safe and clean environment. Students and staff will also be encouraged to wear masks, practice social distancing, class sizes are going to be smaller, there may be daily temperature checks depending on the location, all these kinds of things that are put into place just to make sure that students are safe in each location. Similarly, with the on-the-ground transportation, we're going to be taking into account similar hygiene practices. We also recommend that travelers bring their own hand sanitizer, masks, all that good stuff to bring with them throughout the GAP program. We will be providing additional hand sanitizer and masks for students, but we definitely encourage them to take responsibility for that as well. And finally, just thinking about going ahead, as we innovate and monitor guidance from the CDC and local federal authorities worldwide, we're incorporating new procedures as appropriate to really make sure that we have comprehensive safety measures in place on every EF program. So I know this was very thorough and maybe not the most exciting thing, but I think it's just so important to let you know how in-depth we're thinking about this and how we're taking precautions for our students. So with these precautions in mind, we really feel as excited as ever about the program experience itself. So I know that you're all at least a little bit familiar with what our program looks like, but I want to give just a quick overview here about what the program looks like and how it's designed in these different components. So our program is designed to really give students that global immersion experience. So these are kind of the different components that together really make up our educational philosophy and the heart of our program. So the first is explore multiple countries in depth. That's, the goal of our program is to get students to see themselves in a variety of different environments, interact in new communities, learn things about themselves through interacting in a different community. It's a really incredible way to learn more about yourself through interacting with others in different contexts. Then you look at the different kinds of places that you can see. So with both our gap year and semester programs, we have this European immersion component and this Australia and New Zealand component on the year program that really allows students to see different parts of the world in terms of the most culturally relevant sites in each city, but also really from an insider perspective. So we have these incredible tour directors who are with students every step of the way during these particular parts of the program and really allow them to understand the culture in a way that they probably wouldn't if they were going just on their own or without that special guidance and special kind of thought towards what that experience looks like from the tour director. Next, study and immerse yourself in a language. So this is a part of our year and semester programs as well. And it's a really great way to tap into our existing network of EF language schools across the globe. So, whether you want to brush up on your Spanish in Costa Rica or take Japanese for the first time in Tokyo, there's definitely a language school for you. Next, gaining internship experience abroad. I think this is such an incredible part of our program. There aren't so many students who, at age 18, 19, 20 have already done an international internship. So being able to gain that work experience and we help place you in a place where we know you're going to be really learning and working, not just grabbing coffee. You'll come out of that with these global skills, both in terms of hard skills. Maybe you're at a marketing internship and you're developing skills that are really useful there, but you're also learning about intercultural communication. You're learning how to work in a work environment. You're also gaining that independence and that ability to work that 9-to-5 life, all of these things that are really necessary for students in college and beyond. I also really want to highlight this service learning component. So service learning, I think, is the module where we hear students saying, I feel so transformed when they come out of it. When students come out of this service module, they haven't just felt like they were giving back to a community, but they also felt like they gained a better perspective of the world around them and figured out how to take those lessons back to their home communities. And that's what we really want out of service learning. It's not just volunteering, it's actually being able to think about global issues in a local context and think about how your life back at home might contribute to or interact with these global issues. So I love talking to students after this module because they have so many insights into, how they can do what they want to do in life, but maybe do it a little bit more sustainably, do it a little bit more with thought about how it affects people around the globe. Finally, the leadership component. This is a really core part of our educational philosophy, and it is important because it allows students to really process their experience on the gap. So all of our students get together at the end of the program, together at our Ashridge campus just outside London. And students are really going through an intense series of different workshops. They're hearing from different speakers. They're learning a little bit about how to process that gap experience and take it into their next steps. How can they be a leader on their college campus when they get back, for example? How can they take this into the job market going after that? So it's a great part of our program. Students are always a little confused beforehand. They say, I don't know what to expect. And we say, good, you just go in there. You're going to get so much more out of it than you could ever have anticipated. So this is the EF Gap path, and I'm going to walk you a little bit through the timelines and sort of how you customize those really quickly. So this is the gap year for 2020, 2021. The start date, as you can see, is October 17th, and the end date is May 8th. So we pushed that start date back a month just to give us a little more time for things to clear up a little bit. So it starts with an orientation, then you go into that European immersion component that I talked about a little bit. It's also just such a great way for students to bond with their cohort. We always hear that, you know, going to these amazing cities is really cool. You go to Paris, Barcelona, Amsterdam, but you know what the core of it really is seeing these cities with your fellow gappers. It's, you know, grabbing a coffee with someone and then rounding the corner and seeing the Eiffel Tower. It's those kinds of picturesque moments that you're having along with your new friends that I think really makes it so special. Then you go into that language module, and I talked a little bit about our different language schools, but you know, like I said, we have Spanish in both Spain and Costa Rica, we have Japanese in Tokyo, we have Korean in Seoul, we have Italian in Italy. These are just to name a few. There are so many different options for students depending on both what language they want to learn and what kind of cultural environment they want to be in. So that's what they go into right after the European immersion. This year, because we have a later start date, we moved our winter break back a little bit. So right after that language module, students will actually be able to come home, reconnect with their families, you know, share those photos of all the cool things they've been doing outside the US. And then once they are done with winter break, they'll go right into that Australia and New Zealand immersion, getting to see both, you know, those natural wonders of Australia and New Zealand, as well as these amazing cities like Sydney. It's a really amazing 3-week part of the program that students always really love after the winter break. So after that Australia and New Zealand immersion, students will go into their second custom module, which is service learning. So next year we have Thailand, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic as our 3 service learning options. So we really wanted to make sure that we could put students in countries that you know, we felt really confident in our response there. So those are the 3 that we have limited it to next year. Those are all such amazing destinations. Students have the chance to work in a number of different projects focusing on the community and the environment. So for example, we have an elephant rehabilitation project in Thailand, we have a turtle conservation project in Costa Rica, a coral reef restoration project in the Dominican Republic. And of course, it's just an amazing way to interact with the world around you, learn so much about different global issues. Students really love this module. Finally, the last custom module is the internship, which the most independent. Like I mentioned, students are really, you know, living in an apartment with other gappers. They're learning how to that 9-to-5 commute, all of that good stuff. And we have different location options there, everything from Sydney and Dublin, both English-speaking cities. We have Stockholm, Sweden, Sevilla, Spain. A lot of great things in terms of what work environment you want, what type of business you want to be in. And our GAP consultants are really great at helping students figure out, you know, what's the right path for them. So this is another option that starts in the fall. This is our Costa Rica program, which we actually created just especially for this year because we know that a lot of people are wanting that some destination that's a little bit closer to home, something that's only one location, so not a lot of border crossings. And Costa Rica was kind of a no-brainer for us. Students have had just incredible experiences in Costa Rica in our past programs. So students will be able to have their orientation there, their language module and their service module there at our incredible EF language school in Taberendo, which is right on the Pacific coast. And the service module, like I said, working with that turtle project, working in an after school program with kids, a really great way to be immersed in the community there. And the Leadership Academy will actually be held at the UN, the United Nations University for Peace in San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. So it's a great way to really get that GAP experience just in a condensed form and in one really cool country. So just highlighting the dates for that, that's October 16th through December 12th. And another great option for this coming year, I think this is a really awesome option for folks who are you know, thinking through plans for next year. It's the GAP semester in spring 2021. So it's, you know, it's 12 weeks that allow you to have a lot of customizability in terms of your modules. So say you are a really passionate change maker and you actually want to do a double service learning in both Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. That's totally possible for those custom modules. Say you maybe want to work on your Spanish in Costa Rica and then keep improving it during an internship in Sevilla, Both of those are possible as well. So you can really have any combination here of our 3 types of custom module with language studies, service learning, and internship. So I think this is really important too to think about when we're weighing options for next year. Like, what do you really gain during a gap? What is it that you want to get out of this experience? So I want to highlight a few points here. And the first, I think you can tell through what I was saying before, that our gap programs really focus on learning experientially. It's not about being behind a screen. It's not about memorizing facts. It's not about, sitting in a classroom. It's about, excuse me, learning through living. So the most important part of our program is really being on the road. It's having those amazing bonding experiences with your group. It's being in these new cities, all of these different things. Like I said, I think that social aspect is really important too. Excuse me. Oh, my allergies are acting up again. You really get to bond and grow with a cohort of fellow gappers. So somebody was asking earlier about, the academic versus the social aspects of next year. And I think that's what we want to combine with our program. It's about being a part of a group, getting to learn from fellow students. We have a really diverse group of students on our program, and students are always saying that, they're learning from each other in addition to learning from the communities that they're in. So in terms of a social aspect, I think this is a really great option for students who, maybe aren't satisfied with their university classes being online. They're saying, I really want that in-person experience. I want to bond with others. So that's what we definitely are seeing from our cohort this year. I think too, another thing I want to highlight is that it's really that time to learn more about yourself. That's what we hear every year with our gappers. And I think this is especially true right now. A lot of us are thinking, what are we doing with our lives? These big existential questions, right? How can we be of service to the world around us? How can we learn more about people across the globe? How can we help with these different global issues? And I think going through an experience like this really allows you to explore those options and to see the world around you, to maybe consider career paths that you never even thought about before, to learn how to talk to people that you'd never been able to have talked to before because you couldn't speak the same language, to hear a diverse range of opinions and thoughts about the globe around us. Just to speak personally for a second, I took a gap year myself back in the day, and I came out of it just completely transformed in ways that I could never have anticipated. Just really had a totally different worldview. And I'm sure that a student going through this experience in this particular moment is going to have just an incredible transformation and being an incredible witness to the world around us right now. I also want to emphasize a couple of things too. If you are worried about next year, I think a lot of decisions feel fraught with, with indecision and with insecurity, but we really want you to feel secure. We have an incredible team of GAP consultants. Some of you, I'm sure, have talked to them already. Some of them, this is new for you, but definitely tap into that network of our GAP consultants who can really talk you through any, concerns or worries that you might have individually. In addition to telling you all the details about our EF travel protection plan, so you can feel confident with, with booking that, as well as the global support that I mentioned earlier. So I think this is a great way, when thinking about next year and different concerns you might have, to make sure that you're making a decision where, you feel informed and you feel confident. I think that's the most important thing. Finally, I think the college credit aspect is really important too. So we have an educational partner, Southern New Hampshire University, that issues up to 9 credits for our students should they choose that option. And what's really cool about these classes too is that you're not sitting in a classroom, you're not looking at slides on a computer like all of you are right now, but you're actually able to process what you're doing on your gap by looking at it through an analytical lens. The professors are providing them, with those tools to be able to think about their experience from an academic perspective and really produce an incredible written reflection on that experience that gives them college credit. So that's a great option if you're wanting to make sure that you can return to college afterwards, feeling like you've got a couple of college credits under your belt. I also just want to talk about our expectations of our cohort for next year. We already have such a great group of students in there, and we really expect students to be a true global citizen, right? Adaptable, respectful, aware of the world around you. We think that next year we will have probably the best group of global citizens that we've ever had, people who are excited to travel right now. And just skipping down to this last part, they are flexible, right? They know that their gap might not look exactly like it does right now on paper, but they're excited for that. They're excited for that global experience. They're excited to be able to navigate what's going on in the world. And at the same time, going back up to that second point here, these students are respectful. They know that the precautions that we're putting in place are put in place for their health and safety and for the health and safety of the communities that they're in. So we definitely expect you as a part of the 2020-21 cohort to really, be respectful, think about the communities around you, think about your place in the world, and make decisions accordingly. So these are just some of the key skills here that, we expect students to have a baseline of going into the program and that we really will be developing throughout the year. Self-advocacy, decision-making, resiliency, flexibility, global citizenship, all of these things are so important, even more now than ever. So I want to talk about too, in terms of next steps, I really know, and our whole team knows this is not an easy decision and every family is considering different variables here. So we really want to work with each student on an individual level and provide as much flexibility as possible. But these are some of the, next steps should you decide to go forward with a gap for next year. Before I talk through those steps, I want to say that we do have very limited spots available. It's some of these modules that we have that are actually already on a wait list. So what's really important is to chat with a gap sooner rather than later. We really is to be able to accommodate students who are changing their fall plans. We know that there are so many out there right now. We've seen so much, we also want to make sure that students have a valuable student experience. We do have a certain cohort size in each module that varies a little bit from module to module, but allows for an optimal learning experience. We do and the cohort size at the risk of not providing, the best experience for all students. So with that in mind, we do have a couple of service and internship destinations already on a wait list. So reach out sooner than later to sort of make sure that this can happen for you. So the first step is, as I mentioned a few times during this presentation, chatting with a gap year consultant. They are such incredible resources. Lauren is one of them, Lauren on the keys there. They will talk with you, with your parent, help you design your itinerary based on your personal goals, based on what you want to get out of next year. The second is to complete your application. It's an online application, not quite as arduous, I would say, as a college application, but we want to see what your goals are for next year. We want to know who you are. We want to know what you've been through in life that has set you up well for a gap year. And once you fill out that application, we're able to schedule you for a phone interview with one of our admissions team. And that's a really great opportunity, both for them to get to know you and for you to get to know them, for you to learn more about our program, to answer even more questions that you might have. So it's actually kind of fun in addition to, being an interview and all that. Finally, we do have extended cancellation policies. For example, for Costa Rica, if you're able to book by July 24th, we have risk-free booking until August 15th. For that spring semester, it's through August 31st. So depending on what program you're interested in, definitely talk with your gap consultant to figure out, what the risk is that you're putting down now, what we can do to take that risk, and all of that good stuff. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to all of these slides. I'm going to turn those slides off now and turn my video back on. So I have questions for you all. I am sure you have questions. And I hope I have the ability to turn my video back on. There we go. Hi again, everyone. So I see one question came through. Thank you. How does payment work? Is there a schedule? Yes, so this is something great to talk with your gap consultants about. Thinking about next year, those payments would be in a little bit of a shortened time frame. We usually schedule monthly payment students, so definitely chat with your gap consultant about what makes sense for you and for your family. But we do have an installment plan that's in place for most families, so there are definitely some good options there for you to figure out what works for you. Answers that question. Another question we often get too is about scholarships. So I wanted to talk about that, while we're on the subject of finances. So our scholarship deadline is closed for the program starting this fall, but it's open semester. So if you're someone who is, thinking about this program, trying to figure out how the financial pieces will work for you, definitely think about that spring semester. Not only is it slightly lower price, but it also really allows you to apply for those scholarships. The priority deadline for that is you're able to apply by then. We have some great options through us here at EF, as well as externally. Check out the Gap Association's website for that scholarship info. Another question just came in. What happens if our student gets sick while on GAP? Does US health insurance transfer over? Great question. So we actually offer an insurance plan through EF as well. That's a bit of an additional cost, not a lot for students who are wanting to go on our programs. We definitely suggest that insurance. You're definitely welcome to get other insurance depending on what fits your needs, but our students have often found that it's really quite comprehensive and really helps in situations like this. So we can talk with you to see if that is a great option for a student. That health insurance is in addition to what they would have maybe through you, for example, if they have insurance through their employer, but it would cover them abroad in all of these different situations. So we do require students have insurance of some kind. The EF insurance is great. There are also other great options out there, so we can help you figure out what's right for your family. Great question. How many GAP students in a sleeping room? Is there a single option like with the EF student tours? I would say that this varies from module to module. So, for example, at the language schools, students do have different options to either live with a homestay family, or if they pay a slightly additional fee, they're able to stay at the accommodations in the residences, perhaps in a single room. So if this is something that's really high priority for you, I would say chat with your GAP consultant about it and see how we can figure it out. Some modules, they, like for European immersion, for example, students are staying 2 to a room, most likely, but we are reconsidering what it makes sense to do in terms of health and safety for next year. Should we put a cap on the number of students in a room, that kind of thing? So we're definitely considering that in terms of what it looks like as our overall policy. But if you have some special requests, especially for that language module, that's something that students have done in the past, you can definitely chat with your GAP consultant and see what makes sense there. Great question too about how transgender students are housed. We definitely want to be open and encourage any student of any gender identity to apply for our program. This is a great conversation to have from the beginning with your GAP consultant once the student feels comfortable to really talk about, what their needs are, what their preferences are. We really want to make sure that the student feels safe, feels respected, feels like they're in an environment that suits exactly what they want. So I would say there's no one size fits all policy for that. It's really up to what the student wants to be doing and what we can figure out to ensure that they're feeling comfortable, safe, healthy. So definitely start that conversation with your GAP consultant. We really want to make sure that every student feels like they're in a good situation for them. Great question again. What are the sleeping accommodations for the Costa Rica fall semester? So for those students, I think maybe Lauren just typed in some of the answers, but there are 2 different parts of the program. It's divided into 2. So the first is at that language school in Tamarindo. So their students most will be staying with Homestay Families. I said earlier, every component of our program is going through special training. We're putting in additional health and safety precautions. So Homestay Families are, of course, a really important part of that. So we have protocols going into place in terms of making sure that they maintain certain standards, as well as our students throughout the whole entire part of the program. So many students will stay with Homestay Families. Many students can also choose the option to stay at the accommodations at the language school. So for example, if a student really wants to be living on campus or living in a single room like someone had asked earlier, that's certainly an option too. There's an additional fee there, but definitely chat with your GAP consultant to see if that might be possible there. For the service language component of the program, students are actually staying in different hotels or hostels that are in the local communities where they're working. Again, very high standards are being put into place. We're reevaluating every single place that students have stayed in the past and making sure that they're maintaining our level of safety and health. So we have an incredible team, especially in Costa Rica. I just chatted with them a couple weeks ago. They're really excited about having students there again, and they're really making sure that this is going to be a safe environment for them. On that same note, a question we have here about homestay families, how they're vetted for safety and security. Is there an EF person with them in each location / learning center? So I'm going to answer that in two separate questions. I'm going to answer first about the homestay families themselves. Most of our homestay families have been working with us for a really long time, and they're really used to hosting international students. Our language schools are the ones who are evaluating them, making sure that they're up to a certain standard. They're doing these background checks on them, all make sure that they are, families that are suitable for students. But our language schools have students hosted from across the globe. So a lot of these families are used to having students from the US, from Italy, from Japan. They're really excited to host international students. They're really excited to welcome them as part of their family. So this year especially, I think we're making sure that they're the host families that we trust and that we know and that we are confident will be enacting these different safety protocols that we're putting in place. And then the other part of that question was, is there an EF person with them in each location / learning segment? That's a really great question too. In each component of the program, there is a person who is sort of their point person on the ground. So for example, in the language module, they have both their homestay family and the language school staff, and they have different point people there, from their teacher to the campus director to the activities director. There are all sorts of people there who are their on the ground point person for that time there. They also have, in the European immersion part of the program, for example, the tour director that's with them. So there's somebody who's experienced in leading groups, is really helping them out should, they get sick, for example, or should they lose their phone. They're the ones who the student would go to and say, hey, I have this problem, can you help me solve it? So they're really fonts of knowledge, and they're used to dealing with a lot of sort of small issues that pop up on program. I would also say that students have throughout the program their program advisor. So the program advisor is such a great resource for them. They're actually here with me in the Boston office, and they are people who are guiding students throughout the program. They're their point person for, the larger trajectory of their program, figuring out how they stay on track with their goals, helping them book their flights. They're their point of contact throughout the entire program. So I think it's great that students have resources both on the ground and from afar. So, there's a whole chain of command we go through with students. If this issue happens, this is who you contact. If that issue happens, this is who you contact. So yeah, I have people looking out for them on the ground, globally, everywhere. I hope that helps answer your question there. Answered that about Costa Rica. If a trip is canceled due to COVID, what happens to the tuition? Yeah, so that's what I actually had talked about earlier in terms of what will happen if the program is canceled due to travel just being impossible based on global restrictions. So what our plan is to refund students entirely except for that $500 application fee. So this could be any time, even up to the very day before the program. If something happens globally where we decide it's not safe or where global restrictions are in place for students, that would be what we do. That being said, we also have with EF this incredible global network to be able to pivot. So for example, if a student is scheduled to go to a certain country, there's a travel restriction put in place that says this country's not gonna work for our students right now, we have the ability to move them. So that will be, of course, our plan A and plan B and plan C before we cancel the program entirely. The idea would be that the student would be able to transfer to a different language school. We would facilitate all the flights for that, make sure that's done in an expedient and safe and healthy manner. So, we do have a lot of options, and I think that's a great way to have some security for next year. That our real, the point of our program, as I said, is to have these global experiences. So maybe it's not going to look exactly like what you're planning now, but we will work with students one-on-one to figure out what the next best thing is for them if, one country, for example, is just not possible. But I really hear you on this question. Of course, we get that a lot. So just to confirm one more time, if we cannot travel at all for matters of global policy restriction, everything refunded except that $500 application fee. Great question here that kind of corresponds. What happened with GAP students this year in March when the pandemic started? When did they get home, etc.? I love this question because I'm so proud of what our team did when this did happen. We did have students on the road. Our GAP year and semester students were all across the globe. And what happened was we went into immediate action as soon as the US State Department issued the travel ban from Europe. As soon as the president spoke, we had everyone on the phone, everyone trying to figure out, okay, what should we do? How can we make sure that our students are safe. We can't really predict what's going to happen next, but our team ultimately made the call to bring all of the students globally home as soon as that travel advisory was issued, which was a really smart move. We actually really led the gap industry in bringing our students home. Because students are booked on our flights, we do all that. So we rearranged the flights. We checked in. Those advisors, like I mentioned earlier, were the point people, making sure the students got on their flights, got home safe and sound, all of that. And I'm really proud of what we did. We got all of our students home safe and healthy within a matter of about 48 hours. So, you know, we really respect these global policies. We are there to take action when needed, and we have these global resources to be able to do it. I do think that's important to note. You know, some GAP programs that go internationally still require students to be responsible for their own flights, but we were able to themselves for the students, and that was a really, you know, difficult part for some people trying to get home from abroad, was figuring out how to get on those overbooked flights. So really glad that we could get those students home. We also were able to issue them refunds as well for the parts of the program that they missed. So we are really cognizant that this is an investment, and we want to make sure that, you know, we're doing right by you should anything happen. Another question about Costa Rica. We right now, our group size is going to be about 20. We're getting really close to that number right now. So I would say if you have interest in Costa Rica, get that application in sooner rather than later. We really want to have a group size that allows for cohesion as well as creates a manageable and safe and healthy environment. So we are trying to cap it at around 20. We're trying to figure out what makes the absolute sense for students in the fall, but right now that seems to be about the right group size considering all the circumstances on the ground there. So definitely, oh yeah, Lauren just sent the link to the application and the first step in the admissions process. That's really great. I would say definitely get those apps in soon, especially this past week. We've seen a lot of interest in Costa Rica, so the sooner the better for that. Question here about the language immersion portion. Japan, yes, Japan is still an option. We have an incredible language school right in Tokyo, really, really great staff there. And it depends on which program you're doing. So with the year program, that's a 6-week language immersion portion. With the semester program and Costa Rica as well, it's a 4-week language immersion portion. I'm talking a mile a minute. But Japan is definitely still an option. I would say it's quite a popular destination. Students really enjoy the language school there. The language school there is also really great at planning different excursions. So a lot of things to see both in the Tokyo area and beyond. So a great option there. All right, take a sip of water and see if any other questions come in. If not, you all have asked some amazing questions, and I hope this gives you a little bit of clarity, you know, in where we're coming from for next year. We know this is a really difficult decision, so basically we're just here as resources for you all too. Even if you're just thinking, maybe this is right for me, I have no idea, just give a GAP consultant a call. You know, this is a great time to think about all those different options and consider things that maybe you weren't even thinking about a couple months ago. Oh, a question here about masks. So yes, masks are going to be required in certain parts of the program. We encourage students to bring their own. We will also be providing them. But for example, thinking about language schools, a lot of the language schools are putting in precautions where students need to be wearing masks when they're walking around, for example. So yes, there will definitely be different mask precautions and restrictions in place in different, you know, in different contexts. So yes, definitely thinking about that. Question here, what dates is the planned Christmas break? Off the top of my head, I can't give you exact dates, but it's from early December to early January. So it's allowing students to come home for around a month during that time. Oh, Lauren already gave December 12th through January 15th. That's right. So yeah, just slightly over a month for that winter break. Awesome. Well, feel free to throw any questions in as I ramble a little bit for another minute, but if you do have any other questions, that's what I'm here for. That's what your GAP consultant is here for. So feel free to shoot us an email tomorrow. I'm going to send a follow-up email with some of these resources that I talked about out to all of you. So definitely take a look at that. We are here to answer those questions. So no questions too big, no questions too small. We know this is a hard decision and we just want to be as transparent as possible, provide you with as many options as possible. That's what we're really here for. So thanks so much to everyone for tuning in. We're so excited that you're considering a gap. And, even in these strange times, we are more excited than ever to be creating an amazing gap experience. So hope to hear from you all soon and see those applications soon. Bye.